Hi there, welcome to my little art studio. My name is Lisa Manuzak Wiley, and I wrote and illustrated the graphic novel, The Witches of Pepperwood Bay. Today, I'll be taking you on a magical journey through my workspace, and I'll show you a little bit of my process for creating my book. So, grab yourself a cup of spark root tea, get cozy, and let's dive right in. My studio is filled with all my favorite things: books, art supplies, trinkets, plants. There's something hiding in every corner. It can get a little crowded sometimes, but let's just call it lived in and well-stocked. I love to read, so I've got stacks and stacks of books, not all of which I've gotten around to reading yet, but I will. I also have a shelf of books that I've illustrated. It's pretty cool to see them all together, and it makes me feel accomplished and proud of the work that I've done over the years. Here we have my jewelry bench, where I do silversmithing and goldsmithing. It's a very different medium from drawing digitally, which is nice to flex my creative muscles doing something in a physical 3D space. Speaking of non-digital art, I enjoy all types of crafting, especially cross-stitch and embroidery, and more recently, crochet. And of course, I love to draw and paint in the traditional way. The next best thing to books is art supplies. I also have some skincare products around the place. There might be one or two lip balms. I'm not obsessed or anything. And finally, we have the place where all the magic happens, my desk. Here's my Wacom Cintiq and my trusty iPad with pencil. Sometimes I do sketches on paper when I'm first beginning a project, but I'll explain more about that in a little bit. So now that you've seen the space, I'll show you how I made the Witches of Pepperwood Bay. Hello, welcome to my desk. This is my setup. I have my Cintiq here, my second monitor here, which I use for reference photos or if I'm watching something while I'm working. I have my keyboard here, and I have a second one on top of the Cintiq. I have my iPad, which I sometimes use depending on the day. I have tea, which is very important. And I also have these little controllers, which are used in place of having to go back to your keyboard for hotkeys every single time. This one comes with the Cintiq, and it is programmable. Sometimes I use this, but I actually prefer to use this one, which is actually supposed to be used for a Nintendo Switch, but I've reprogrammed the keys to correlate to the different tools that I use when I'm in Photoshop. We also have this, which is a single finger glove, also known as a digital artist glove, and it's used to make a smooth surface on your hand. So when you're drawing, you glide smoothly across the surface, and if you're sweaty or if it's like a hot day, then it helps with that a whole lot. So that is the basic setup, and I'll bring you in a little bit closer to show you exactly what I do. So there are lots of different ways to start a graphic novel depending on your own preferences, but for me, once I did some character designs and got a good visual understanding of the main three witches, I started to develop the story. Since this story started out as a webcomic, I didn't have the whole script fully written out because I was working page by page and I was figuring things out as I went along. I did have a general idea of where the story would go, but it wasn't until much later that I actually wrote the full script. After that, the script underwent lots of edits, and then I got it printed and bound, because sometimes it's easier to see mistakes or make edits in a different format. So that's what this is, and you can see where I've made edits here and there. Like changing a word somewhere, or where the chapters get divided up. And after I've made the edits here, I will transfer those edits to the digital document. Once I'm comfortable with where the script is, I will start with the thumbnails. So here's where I sometimes draw on paper, because thumbnails or layouts are meant to be just a general idea of what the page will look like and where everything will be placed, so I can be a little bit messier. But for the most part, I do thumbnails on my iPad or in Photoshop. And the setup I like to use for this process is having multiple pages on a single page so that I can see how everything flows together And also forcing myself to work smaller means that I don't get caught up in little details, since the most important thing is the overall feel of the page. I also make sure to leave room for speech bubbles, and just place all the visual components of the script on the page. Sometimes I need to go back and adjust the script because I've discovered something that doesn't work visually, so it's a little bit of a back and forth when I'm doing layouts. So this is what the thumbnails look like in Procreate, and I'm not going to get too close because this is for the second book in the series, so let's just keep that a secret for now. Once all the thumbnails are done and approved, I move on to inks or line art. For this particular graphic novel, the inks are used in a bit of a different way to others where the lines are part of the final art. Since my final art is lineless and doesn't use the inks at all, I use this step to refine the thumbnails and basically do a very cleaned up sketch where everything is mostly where I want it to be and designs are finalized. It makes doing the final art a lot easier because I don't have to think about the design and I just think about color. If there's an environment heavy page, I sometimes leave the line art more loose because I tend to paint a little bit more intuitively with environments and see what works best in the moment. So when the line art stage is finished, I get to move on to the best part, which is the final color. So now that all the groundwork has been laid, I can just get straight into coloring. I like to separate each panel into its own folder to make the layer management easier. I use plugins that make the painting process a lot easier, and this particular one is a customizable panel that has my most used tools and brushes available at the tap of my pen. Speed is of the essence when you're in the zone and on a deadline, so any little bit helps. I have a separate file with my color palettes for each character so that I can just eyedrop the correct color and I don't have to guess on the color panel and everything stays consistent. So usually I'll just put that on the side here and it'll be right there for when I need it. So in the layers panel, I have the line art layer at the very top, and I'll just lower the opacity and sometimes turn on multiply so that I can see clearly no matter what's underneath it. I add layers for all the different elements like clothes and skin and hair, and I just try to keep all those things separate so that I can edit them easily. And basically it's just like a coloring book and I just have to color within the lines. Of course, I make sure that the edges are nice and sharp and clean by turning off the line art layer now and again. And in this process, I work in all the little details and shadows and all that good stuff. So from here on out, it's just coloring and adjusting and figuring out what looks good and what doesn't. It can be a long process, especially the environment pages, but when a page is finished and all the final textures are put on and color adjustments have been done, it is really satisfying to look at. The next stage after this is lettering, and the letters for this book were done by Haley Rose Lyon, who is an amazing letterer and really helped bring this book together. This stage includes all the speech bubbles and the sound effect text, which are great for conveying that extra oomph. So when all is said and done, the final files get sent to the publisher, they work their magic, and a few months later, a baby book is born. It's a lot of work that goes into making a graphic novel, but once you can hold it in your hands and flip through the pages, it's a really good feeling. So I hope you enjoyed this little peek into my process, and I hope you liked the studio tour, and I also hope that you read my book. So until next time, stay magical.